Hello and welcome to Every Movie Ever. I'm your host, Eric, and this is, of course, the show where we are reviewing every movie ever made, starting today with Annie. So this is of course, the 70s musical sensation adapted from the, 20s or 30s comic strip about the blank-eyed little orphan girl with the red curls who gets adopted by a rich dude and enters into a life of adventure and luxury. Now, this is one of those movies that was very, very popular when I was growing up, and it seemed like everybody else in class in grade school had seen. I, however, had somehow managed to make it to this ripe old age without ever having seen Annie. Of course, I know the broad strokes. I know about some of the songs. I know about some of the cast. I know the whole affair. But like I said, never bothered to watch it. Finally sat down to watch it, and let me tell you something, it's charming. Annie is a charming movie. I liked it quite a bit. I think the thing that stuck out to me the most and that I will always take away from it is that despite being set in the 1930s, Annie is 70s as hell. This whole thing just reeks of the 70s somehow. Just the look of the film stock, the whole thing just feels, despite that 30s veneer, very 70s, which only endears me to it, as does the tremendous cast. Not only is the little girl who plays Annie terrifically charming, which is hard to do, right? We talk about kid actors a fair amount on this show, and it is difficult to find a kid actor who can act their way out of a paper bag, let alone carry a big blockbuster musical on their shoulders, and, well, this young woman certainly does it. In addition to her, you, of course, have the terrific Carol Burnett playing the orphanage owner in this movie. She's always a good time. Not sure I'm real sold on Carol Burnett as evil. I find that somewhere deep within me a little unsettling, but, I suppose I should. In addition to that, you've got Bernadette Peters, who I always adore, and Tim Curry, the great screen villain star of movies like Rocky Horror Picture Show and Legend, killing it as side characters. They play Carol Burnett's brother and, I guess, sister-in-law, who are helping her hatch a plot where they're going to pretend to be Annie's birth parents. And they are absolutely deliciously, comically sinister in this. Also terrific is Albert Finney. He is an actor, kind of one of those, I know him now as kind of an older British guy actor. He's in that movie Big Fish. He's not a guy that I've ever given a whole lot of thought or attention to, but I found him very enjoyable in Annie. He plays Rich Uncle Moneybags, or whatever the heck his name is, and he's terrific. He brings real verve and energy to the part. He is, in a way, he reminds me of the lead character in There Will Be Blood, of Daniel Day-Lewis's oil baron in that movie. And I think in part that's because Daniel Day-Lewis based that part on John Huston, the great film director, no relation. And Albert Finney seems to be basing his portrayal of Pennybags or Moneybags or whatever his name is on John Huston as well, which shouldn't be terribly surprising because I believe, and this is where my poor research hits me once again, I believe John Huston is involved in this production. I want to say he's the director. Let's turn now to the box graphics to see if I'm correct. Well, there you have it. In any event, Annie, an enormously charming movie, I think certainly deserving of its reputation as a children's cinema classic. 3.5 stars. Friends, whether you know it or not, because I don't think we've talked about it too much here, M. Night Shyamalan is persona non grata in these parts. And here's the deal. Listen, everybody loved The Sixth Sense. We all love The Sixth Sense. My dad especially loved it, and he will talk to you at great length about the moment in the theater when everybody figured out the twist at the same time. I suspect that a lot of people's dads like M. Night Shyamalan, or like The Sixth Sense. Here's the problem. Talk about a guy who hit a home run in his first feature, and I have to specify, I've seen Sixth Sense since, but not in, now there's a tongue twister, but not in quite a long time. So I am curious if it holds up. I remember going to see it in the theaters the second time once you know the deal and being a little like, well, this is a little underwhelming. So I don't know if it holds up. But what I can tell you is I never really cared for Unbreakable. I outright despise Signs. And in fact, I've gotten into arguments with nuns about the movie Signs. That's real. And then the rest of M. Night's catalog is pretty shabby. So when Split came out, this is I think this is still his latest movie. It's a movie about a dude with split personalities who's also a murderer. I was, of course, not terribly interested. And then the reviews started coming in from like-minded internet nerds that said, hey, Split was real good. So I threw caution to the wind and saw Split, and I'll tell you what, it's pretty good. I think it's no exaggeration to say that Split is M. Night's best movie since The Sixth Sense. I've heard good things about the one he made before this, The Visit or whatever, but I haven't seen that. So we're going to stick with that assessment. It's good. It's a good movie. It stars James McAvoy as well, I guess not titular, but as the killer, the split personality killer. And James McAvoy is the MVP of this movie. He absolutely nails the performance and in playing every aspect of the killer's multiple personalities. And it seems that McAvoy is really relishing the part, which is nice to see. I like McAvoy as an actor. And I think he's a great character actor, and it's terrific to see him sink his teeth into some characters. Beyond that, the movie actually centers on a group of 3 young women who have been kidnapped by Split and are trying to escape before they are murdered. They are largely paper-thin characters, and except for the lead lady, who brings us to my set of problems with this movie. One is this thing is chock full of M. Night Shyamalan-isms, including that he feels the need to cast himself in the movie. M. Night, I don't know if I'm going to go so far as to call you a good director. You are certainly not a good actor. Knock it off. This is a movie that, let's put the spoiler alert up on the screen. I'm going to spoil some things about Split. It's a movie where it turns out at the end that the ultimate murderer personality that Split has superpowers. We could do without the superpowers. It is plenty threatening enough. And that's the thing this movie gets super right, is atmosphere. M. Night does a lot with atmosphere and shadow that works super well. We don't need superpowers in addition to that. We also don't need, at the very end, the twist, such as it is to tie this movie into Unbreakable. As it turns out, these 2 movies are in the same universe. We get a Bruce Willis cameo at the end, threatening that in a future sequel that these 2 are going to meet and tussle. But the last thing is getting back to that main lady. So the movie, her story of trying to escape from Split's very menacing and well-executed underground lair is that it's intercut with the story of her abuse as a young woman at the hands of that evil security guard from Orange is the New Black. He's her dad's friend. He murdered her dad, took her in as his stepdaughter, and is abusing her. We didn't need that movie. No one needs that. You could have shown that she was a strong and resourceful woman without needing to go to the hackneyed and cliched abuse closet. So you're on notice for that movie. But again, it is very atmospheric and it works pretty well. It's a very pulpy movie. Clearly this is a much more low-budget affair than Sixth Sense or Unbreakable, and I think that suits M. Night pretty well, both in his good instincts and his bad, although it shows more through the good. Because we get this really stripped-down suspense film, which is much more effective, and I think the limitations on M. Night and what he has to do to create suspense without special effects make it a stronger movie. But there's no ignoring those reservations I said that I have. Still, I do have to categorize this movie as good. I did like it. I would be willing to see it again. I am going to give it 3 stars. All right, folks, it is time to talk sci-fi movies, which means we're heading over to Spaced Out. Allow me, if I may, to recite a lyric from Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I really got hot when I saw Jeanette Scott fight a Triffid that spits poison and kills. That, I have to tell you, is the pure limit of my knowledge of the movie Day of the Triffids, is that according to the opening number from Rocky Horror Picture Show, it stars Jeanette Scott, it features Triffids, which you probably do from the title. Said Triffids spit poison and kill. And I knew they were plants from just living in the world. Day of the Triffids, this is the movie that we're talking about. This is a, 1950s, 1960s British sci-fi monster movie wherein listen, this movie's a lot more complicated than I had thought it would. I thought this was going to just be a killer plant movie. But as it turns out, this is a movie wherein a meteor passes over the Earth or crashes into the Earth. I'm fuzzy on this. And when it goes over the Earth, it blinds everyone. Everyone becomes blind, except for a select few who are in various, states that save them from being blind. Our hero, for example, had just had eye surgery in a hospital, and he's got them bandages over his eyes. And the next morning, he wakes up, takes the bandages off, still able to see, and finds the world in chaos. Which, incidentally, did Danny Boyle see this movie before he made 28 Days Later? Because that kind of initial conceit is a little familiar. In any event, and so then the movie becomes about two things. It becomes about a nation of newly blinded people trying to just get through life. And also now there are killer and mobile ambulatory plants walking around shooting poison at them. Here's the thing. This is a pretty good movie. I was much more interested in the chaos created by everyone losing their sight than I was by the Triffids, who, truth to tell, are barely in it. It also does that sort of 50s sci-fi and later disaster movie thing where we're following simultaneously like 2 or 3 groups of people. I think the movie would have done well to eliminate one of those groups. There's a couple in a lighthouse who are working on ways to kill the Triffids that we check in with every now and again that I didn't really care about, in part because I don't really care about the Triffids. Add to that this. So for whatever reason, it seems to be impossible to find a copy of Day of the Triffids that looks any good. All of the copies online, and from what I can tell, the copies on DVD are all this same just awful washed out print, which makes it kind of a hard movie to watch, which is a shame because, look at a Hammer horror movie. Britain knew how to do lurid color in their horror movies well, and I would like to see Day of the Triffids in its full glory. I think that would knock this movie up, maybe even a spot or two. As it is a pretty interesting sci-fi, suspense monster movie. But yeah, like I said, I could lose the monsters. Still, pretty good movie. 3 stars. Folks, let's open up the Columbo files. Today's Columbo, this is a 90s Columbo, so the usual disclaimers apply. 90s Columbo's not as good as 70s Columbo's, but this is a pretty fun 90s Columbo. This one is Butterfly in Shades of Grey, and it features William Shatner essaying a sort of Bill O'Reilly conservative radio pundit character. Who is worried that his daughter is going to get a new job and leave, and so he murders her boyfriend, and Columbo has to, solve it. Shatner is the big draw here. We all know William Shatner, and we all know what a camp actor he has become. And by this point in his career, he is ready to swing for the camp fences. He is really going all out on this one with a weird sort of silly, sinister air. It's a performance I would call highly caffeinated from William Shatner. He's very excited all the time. He also has a really stupid mustache. So this is a Columbo that in that 90s mold sort of qualifies. I don't know if it's so bad it's good so much as that, I mean, Peter Falk is, as always, excellent as Columbo. It's just the murder world he finds himself in is a highly and especially camp one today, which is very fun in its own right. So, Columbo, Butterfly in Shades of Grey. What does that title mean? It's a stupid title. 3.5 stars. And now time for Animation Station. Folks, I recently watched on the Netflix, I saw Space Pirate Captain Harlock. I am arguably not the person to be reviewing this movie, but as is my mandate, I must see every movie ever made, which includes Space Pirate Captain Harlock, which, as I understand it, and I expect to see plenty of comments below, is based on a like 70s Japanese anime about said same Captain Harlock. I don't know anything about it. I've never been a big anime fan. Lord knows I've tried. I have seen Space Pirate Captain Harlock around, and his design is very cool, as is the design of his spaceship. So I thought I'd be willing to try a modern CGI animated Captain Harlock movie. Maybe I'll learn something about the character and his world. Maybe I will enjoy it. I did not. It's not an outright bad movie, but it's very ho-hum. For a movie about space pirates with cool spaceships and eye patches and things, this movie is very, very boring. Also, the animation is pretty bad. As far as CG animation goes, this feels much more like video game animation than it does, full feature movie animation. There are no characters to speak of in this movie. I cannot say that I learned anything about Captain Harlock or any of the assorted characters that he surrounds himself with. The plot, super lackluster. It does, however, remain very well designed, not just the elements that I assume that it's importing from the anime, but as well in the new elements it's created as well. It is a good looking movie from a design standpoint, if not particularly well animated. So Space Pirate Captain Harlock, I don't think it's anything. I'm going to give it 2 stars. All right, friends, let's call all horror hounds. This week on Calling All Horror Hounds, we're checking out Insidious. I'd never seen this one up until recently. I came to James Wan, or James Wan? I don't know. The new hotness horror director through The Conjuring, which I loved. Now, The Conjuring stars Patrick Wilson, who is a sort of unsung modern actor who I also love. Add to that mix Rose Byrne, a tremendous Australian actress who I just fell in love with in Neighbours. She has such a terrific performance there, as well as in other pictures like Spy, where she turns in a really killer performance. And you get Insidious. So that's James Wan directing, Wilson and Byrne starring. Solid, solid movie. It's a haunted house feature wherein Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne are parents whose son has slipped into a coma, and oh yeah, as if that ain't bad enough, their house haunted, man. Their house haunted. Except, and here's the big twist, spoiler alert! House ain't haunted. The kid is haunted. So even when they move to a different house, the haunting goes with them, and Patrick Wilson has to go into a sleepy dream nightmare land to fight the demon that is possessing their kid and causing a lot of trouble. This is a pretty good movie. I understand how this has led to a sort of franchise of mostly, I guess they've been in theaters. I want to call them direct to video, but I think that they do have small theatrical runs. It's a good movie. You can see where it is sort of a rough draft for The Conjuring. There is a Van Helsing, a psychic medium character who comes in late into the movie to, tell us what's up and help everybody through. And you can see Wan's interest in that character. And certainly the franchise seems to have pivoted to following the development of her character as a younger woman. But you can see where Wan is interested in that and then pivots in the Conjuring movies to have Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga essay that role and become the true heroes, as opposed to what usually happens in these sort of horror movies where those characters stroll in late to explain what's going on. It's a solid movie. It's not The Conjuring, but I liked it a fair amount, enough to give it 3.5 stars. So I did like Insidious enough that I went right into watching Insidious Chapter 2. Same cast returning for this one. I'm sorry to say it does not live up to the heights of Insidious, where Insidious is a successful modern horror movie with some good with good creature design and very solid acting anchoring the whole thing. Insidious Chapter 2 is largely a retread. Except in this one, now Patrick Wilson's the possessed one. But we have to follow more or less the same story patterns to get out of it. And it's just, it feels like leftovers. It's just not as good. It's not the same. I think the franchise was wise from here to pivot to doing stories of the psychic medium character in her youth, as opposed to just trying to get this same family into sticky situations. I assume that's also in part because they couldn't afford Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne anymore. But what are you going to do? So I don't really have a lot to say about Insidious Chapter 2 beyond that it is lukewarm and kind of boring. So I'm going to give it 2.5 stars. Okay, guys, it is time for no one's favorite part of the show. This is the worst of the week. And we are breaking with precedent here, folks, because not only is this a worst of the week segment, this is also an MST3 A to Z. What? What is going on? Here's the deal. So we have a segment on the show, MST3 A to Z, where we are looking at every Mystery Science Theater 3000 movie in alphabetical order. And sort of an unwritten rule of that, I don't know why I feel the need to explain this to you, is that MST3 A to Z movies are ineligible for Worst of the Week. Because we know going into it that they're bad, and we don't want it every week on this show for one of those movies to be the worst of the week. Well, we are breaking with precedent here because I just watched The Castle of Fu Manchu. A lot of people come up to me and they say, hey, Eric, what's the worst movie you've ever seen? And I often say Cocktail because I really dislike Cocktail. But I have certainly seen worse movies than Cocktail. And I know a lot of people will cite a fellow MST alum that we haven't talked about yet in the segment, Manos, The Hands of Fate, as the worst movie ever made. That's a movie I cut some slack because that's a bunch of inexperienced people in Texas just trying to make a movie. So, there's a certain charm to the DIY aspect of it. Castle of Fu Manchu is a movie that was made by people who should know better and remains as boring and lifeless and frustrating, and in fact more so, than Manos or Cocktail or any other thing. This movie is really rough. It's a movie that Mystery Science Theater cannot save in any kind of respect. It's maybe the worst episode of Mystery Science Theater because this movie is so hard to watch. What's the movie about? I don't know. Christopher Lee, the great Hammer horror star and star of The Lord of the Rings and the Star Wars prequels, is playing Fu Manchu in this one. He's a terrific and super menacing actor. His Dracula is perfection. He is wasted here as Fu Manchu. He doesn't get a lot to do. Plus, let's say it, it's a little racist. I mean, we are yellow facing it. It is a white guy, not just playing a character who is canonically Asian, but they make him up as Asian in this, and that is rough stuff. As far as what the plot of this movie is, I have no idea. He's trying to do something. You cannot follow this movie. The plot is inscrutable. The action is super slow and boring. There is also no discernible protagonist in this movie. I mean, arguably you're following the antagonist. It is Fu Manchu's movie, and there do seem to be heroes like some government agents or something in this movie, but I don't know who they are or what they want or what their characters is. This is just the most muddled, ugly mess of a movie you have ever seen. We don't give 0 stars on this show, which means that the least I can give Castle of Fu Manchu is a well-deserved half of a star. All right, it's time for Best of the Bunch. We're running out of time on today's show, so I don't have a lot of time to talk about this week's Best of the Bunch, which is a shame because it is the eternal Hollywood classic, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, one of Jimmy Stewart's finest movies, anchored by that Stewart performance, which seems simple and easy but isn't. In this movie where Jimmy Stewart plays a younger man who gets sort of a temporary appointment to Congress. He's meant to be a Senate placeholder, such as it is, just a PR stunt. But he decides he's a Boy Scout leader who has all of these morals and ideas about what the country should be, and he takes them with him to Washington and decides to act on them. And it seems like that sort of wide-eyed optimism should be easy to play, but Stewart plays it with such a true earnestness and belief that that's what is at the heart of this movie. Contrast that with the lead actress, Jean Arthur, who's a terrific cynic in this and plays that perfectly, is a sort of perfect acid to balance out Stewart's sweetness that keeps the movie from becoming too saccharine and also anchors it a little more in a reality as the woman who has seen the workings of Washington and lost faith in it, but whom Stewart's optimism softens. This is a moving movie. It is a great movie. It's an inspiring movie. It is, I think, despite what side of whatever is going on in Washington right now that you might find yourself on, it is a breath of fresh air to see someone go into what is often a quagmire of Washington and make a real difference. And I think it is to this movie's credit that it doesn't play around with trying to discuss who is what party or trying to, push a left or right agenda, but simply trying to push a humanist agenda, which the movie does extremely well. It is a huge and enormous and enduring classic for a reason. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 5 stars. That is going to do it for this episode of Every Movie Ever. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank our always terrific crew for all of the hard work they do. And I also very quickly want to direct you to go to our website. That's northmetrotv.com/everymovieever. There you can find not only complete episodes of this show, but we've broken down every review we've ever done, so you can check out movie reviews very easily. Check it out. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next time as we keep trying to review every movie ever made.